The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Morning, Madam Speaker. Unless just me offer our regret for causing the late start of Parliament this morning.
Thank you, honorable member.
There are not a lot of moving parts in respect to where I am at this moment, and that contributed to us not being on time. We regret that, and as you said, we hope it will not happen again. While I stand, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Right Honourable Perry Gladstone Christie, former Prime Minister. I welcome his presence and support as I present the first budget, the true budget of my administration. Of course, I also note in the gallery pot cake. Leslie Miller and the indomitable spirit of Loretta Butler. I think I also see the former Minister of Education, Jerome Fitzgerald. Of course, the Attorney General and the leader of the Senate, Michael Keatis. And I just want to tell them that their presence bolsters me, and I just hope we don't let either of you down.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, the wonderful people of Cat Island, Rum Key and San Salvador, whom I represent in this House, and in whose name I rise today, are famous for their long histories, their deep-rooted sense of tradition, their unshakable bonds of friendship and family, and their proud connection to the lands they inhabit. And the most famous landmarks on these islands amplify and echo the spirit and character of the people. The expressive rock carvings in Hartford Cave on Rum Key that hold the secrets of the Lucayan and Arak people who once lived there. The pioneering spirit of Landfall Park, San Salvador, where Christopher Columbus is thought to have first landed, and the sacred peak of the Hermitage on Mount Alvernia, the highest point in our Bahamas, on Cat Island. Madam Speaker, it remains the greatest privilege of my life to represent the people of these islands, and the greatest honor to lead our country, especially at a time when the country yearns for change and progress. And as a new administration, for the first time, I'm able to fully set out my administration's priorities and choices in a national budget. We wish to present a landmark budget, one that steers the country in a new direction, better able to take both advantage of the many opportunities which we have been blessed, and also to withstand and overcome the many challenges currently facing the world in which we live. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to present to the House the fiscal year 2022-2023 draft estimates of revenue and expenditure or the budget, along with this accompanying budget communication. On coming into office last September 2021, 8 months ago, Bahamians will well remember that the country was in the throes of the worst health crisis and the worst economic crisis in living memory. Madam Speaker, at the end of the summer of 2021, last year, the public finances were on the edge of a fiscal cliff. It was these circumstances that the former Prime Minister called a snap election. In his explanation as to why he did so, he said to the congregation of the new Mount Olive Baptist Church in November 2021, and I quote, "I would say to you, we have some headwinds that are coming. In order to manage those headwinds we see coming, it was essential to have a new mandate because very, very difficult decisions have to be made." Close quote. Madam Speaker, my government was elected on a mandate to tackle that economic crisis and change the Bahamas for the better. We were elected on a 10-point plan to recover, rebuild, and ultimately revolutionize the economy, details of which were contained in the document, Our Blueprint for Change. This is the daily roadmap for our administration. We instantly set to work with implementing changes which had immediate beneficial impacts on the economy. My first action was to abolish the curfew, the first step in removing unnecessary COVID-19 protocols and restrictions. Immediately, Madam Speaker, businesses were able to reopen and employees were able to return to work. VAT and other revenues, therefore, immediately increased, such that the government's surplus cash balance in October 2021 had improved by nearly $35 million. Over the ensuing weeks, we set about implementing the plans we had made to address the country's most urgent problems. We introduced free COVID-19 testing, distributed free masks, and increased the number of doctors and nurses in hospitals. We ended the emergency orders, and the economy sprang back to life. Bahamians returned to work, young people returned to school, and investor confidence increased. We were keen not merely to jumpstart the economy, to stimulate economic activity and growth, but to do so in compassionate ways that brought hope and dignity back to people. We paid nurses, doctors, teachers, and other public sector workers what they were owed up to the current year. And in December 2021, we ensured that every single Bahamian who was receiving a $100 weekly payment from National Insurance Board received a $500 lump sum payment in December. Madam Speaker, in total, $6.8 million was distributed to Bahamians, ordinary Bahamians, who had been restricted from being able to earn an honest living for so long. The country's credibility and standing, Madam Speaker, is much improved, and the economy is on the right track. This budget 2022, the way forward, puts us firmly on course to continue to rescue the economy. It also charts a course to help us navigate some of the new challenges facing the global economy, especially since the beginning of 2022, as well as maximize the opportunities and deliver the growth necessary to support national development. Madam Speaker, this budget is organized around three central priorities. The first priority is to help Bahamians cope with a cost of living crisis. Bahamians were already struggling with high energy prices, high food prices, and inexpensive housing costs. In recent months, geopolitical conflicts and continued supply chain disruptions around the world have caused prices here at home to go up even further, which has put the squeeze on everyone, especially the middle class and the most vulnerable. Our strategy for softening the impact of this global inflation crisis includes a mix of broad-based import duty reductions, increased enforcement of price controls, an increase in the minimum wage for public servants, increase social services assistance. Important new support for catastrophic health care. The establishment of the Universal Service Fund to make technology more accessible and affordable throughout our Bahamian Islands. A substantial investment in promoting home ownership. And of course, energy reform to reduce its costs. And we are thinking medium and long term, with significant investments in agriculture to increase the nation's food security. The more we are able to feed ourselves, the better we can withstand external shocks in international markets and ensure that good, healthy, affordable food choices are always available for our people. Madam Speaker, investing in an agriculture sector will not only help our country weather volatility in global markets. Investing in agriculture means opportunity, which brings me to our second priority, the creation and expansion of jobs and ownership opportunities for Bahamians. These include planned investments in the orange, green, and blue economies, and the monetization of carbon credits and associated technologies to ensure the long-term development of the country. Education and training are fundamental to our national development, and so this budget includes measures to strengthen education and address the learning loss experienced by so many of our young people during the past few years. A key element in our recovery is to stimulate the creation of good jobs. This budget increases investment in public infrastructure and creates direct partnerships with institutions to provide expanded job training opportunities. And finally, the third priority addresses various security issues to make our communities and homes safer and our borders more secure. We will make significant investments in the three core national security agencies, namely the Department of Corrections, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. As one of the top 10 countries in the world most vulnerable to climate change, we have already made it one of our top priorities to ensure that our Bahamas is better able to withstand the impacts of rising sea levels, erosion of our coastal and marine resources, and adverse weather events. These considerations are reflected in the budget. Before I go further in this communication, I wish to highlight the fact that even though this budget represents an important part of the government's overall strategy to grow the economy, it does not represent the entire effort. Aside from the allocation of resources from the Consolidated Fund, the government intends to leverage other mechanisms to bolster the economic activity and stimulate job creation. For example, our government is intent on fostering a partnership between the Bahamas Maritime Authority and the LJM Marine Academy to offer more training opportunities for Bahamians in the maritime sector. While this arrangement will not fully be reflected in a single line item in the budget, this initiative is poised to provide real and significant job opportunities to hundreds, if not thousands, of Bahamians. It's also important to note, when looking at the budget, that any individual line item is often only one aspect of a larger, interwoven set of policies. Let me give an example from another area of special focus, which is our support for small businesses. Part of the core ideology of our party is to support small businesses' development, because we view this as an extremely effective means of empowering the majority of citizens in this country. During our previous terms in office, we created the Bahamas Development Bank, the Bahamas Agriculture and Industrial Corporation, the Venture Capital Fund, and the Small Business Development Center. We have committed $50 million per annum to small business development through these various institutions. We still hold fast to this commitment. We believe that these institutions will be leading this effort, especially the Small Business Development Center, which has unused loan resources, and the Bahamas Development Bank, which is in discussions with the Caribbean Development Bank to receive substantial funding. As part of an overall effort to increase access to capital for small businesses, in this fiscal year, we also propose to study the operations of our capital markets. We recognize that more will be said about the capital markets during the course of the debate. We recognize that $50 million on per annum basis is just a portion of the required funding that small businesses need to grow this economy. With commercial banks lending focused primarily on the consumer market, we have to create other avenues for small business financing, and we think the capital markets industry could do that. In partnership with the Central Bank of the Bahamas, we also propose to increase efforts to increase the circulation and use of the sand dollar. We believe it is a great tool which will help to reduce the transaction costs many small businesses face when handling cash. The sand dollar makes digital financial services available to micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. That will also make transactions for those businesses faster and more secure. Taken together, Madam Speaker, our support for maritime training and for the development of small businesses is substantial. However, it is impossible to fully understand this without referring to several areas of the budget. Investment and support in these two important areas of national development are reflected across a number of lines in the budget, and so should be interpreted accordingly. Madam Speaker, for the remainder of this communication, I will first highlight additional key priorities of the government. I will summarize the domestic and international macroeconomic conditions within which we are operating, many of which will influence, support, and/or constrain our policy actions. Madam Speaker, I will then report on the fiscal performance of the government for the first 9 months of the fiscal year from July 2021 to March 2022. In order to support investors, lenders, and the Bahamian people in their planning, I will finally set out the government's projections for the fiscal year 2022-2023 so that we share a common understanding of the way forward. Madam Speaker, in our first speech from the throne, my government articulated a list of key priorities that we aim to fulfill in our first 5 terms. It was more than a to-do list of things that we want to achieve. It was also a statement of the values and principles upon which we would govern. We called upon every sector of the community to partner with us in order to achieve national success. We promised to be fair and inclusive and to operate at the highest standards of integrity. We promised to restore competence to governance, to be compassionate in all our dealings, and to govern in the interests of the many and not just the few. We promised to be transparent, open, and accountable in our decision-making and actions. These are the values and principles which we hold dear, Madam Speaker, which remain the guiding lights of our administration. I believe that one of the most tangible expressions of our commitment in this regard is to be found in our weekly press conferences and in our engagements with the media and members of the public. Because of this new openness and desire for public participation, we hope that this budget exercise prompts many voices and contributions from a wide cross-section of the Bahamian public. In respect to the specific commitments made in the speech from the throne, I'm happy to report that we have already fulfilled many of these goals and are making substantial progress on others. Just to highlight a few, we have already begun the process of improving government revenues by reconstituting the Revenue Enhancement Unit. Among other benefits, this will ensure equity in the government taxation and increase the yields on our real property tax. We have appointed a private sector debt management committee, assisted by an independent financial advisor who will devise clear objectives and a strategy to manage the high levels of debt accumulated over the past 3 years. During the first half of the new fiscal year, legislation will be brought to this Honorable House to amend and improve the Public Procurement Act, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the Public Financial Management Act. In previous communications, I have reported to the House on the many deficiencies contained in these hastily enacted pieces of legislation. Work is already well underway, and the proposed reforms will be brought soon. We have reduced the rate of VAT from 12% to 10%. Across the board. We can already see signs that it is having the desired effect, which is to reduce the overall tax burden. When Bahamians purchase meat, vegetables, fruit, poultry, fuel for cooking, or for transportation, we now pay VAT of 10% rather than the previous 12%. Now, we had hoped that reduction from 12 to 10% across goods and services would be experienced as real relief for Bahamians. Unfortunately, and we take note, a very rapid rise in global prices coincided with this new measure. We are very aware it is hard to experience relief from a tax cut when underlying prices are high and rising and life feels so unaffordable. But overall, the changes of that have been good for the Bahamas. For example, think about it, the fast food franchises and the hotels had been the biggest beneficiaries of the zero-rated bread. Now the country is earning much-needed revenue from those sources. Continuing the list of achievements from the promises made in the speech from the throne, as you will soon hear, work has already begun to increase the share of renewable energy in the country's energy mix to achieve the target of 30% reliance on renewables by 2030. When the Minister of Works brings his contribution, the House will hear how work is already progressed well to improve and introduce new building code standards in order to provide greater resilience to climate change. As a matter of priority, we have already accelerated investments in the agriculture sector to improve food security and reduce our reliance on imports, a point that the Minister of Agriculture will further expand during his contribution. Other notable goals already fulfilled from the speech from the throne also include legislation which has already been enacted to allow the Bahamas to monetize its natural resources in the form of carbon credits. The Merchant Shipping Bill, which has been enacted and is already leading to improvements in that sector. We have improved relations with international partners and now have a fully crafted trade policy and strategy to increase trade opportunities. Our diplomatic corps has been strengthened, and the Bahamas is already benefiting from the appointments of new cultural and trade ambassadors. Madam Speaker, we have already relaunched our Sports in Paradise initiative to diversify our tourism product and have already secured a pipeline of sporting events, such as the Babe Ruth Caribbean Championships that's going to be held soon. Senior citizens are already enjoying the benefit of increased pension support, which has been augmented to allow for increases in the cost of living. We have also enhanced access to housing with the construction of new homes in New Providence, and new homes in Abaco are on the way. Improved training and better career opportunities are already being made available to members of the public service, which is enhancing and streamlining service delivery for the benefit of the public. We are also putting into practice our commitment to inclusive governance. As an example, just 2 weeks ago, I hosted the first business roundtable with key leading business leaders from various sectors of our community. Added to all this, Madam Speaker, there is new hope on the horizon for Grand Bahama. An agreement has been reached for the sale of the Grand Lucayan Hotel for $100 million. The renovations are estimated at $300 million, and once completed, the project promises to provide 2,000 construction jobs and approximately 1,000 permanent jobs. Ground has also already been broken for the construction of a new cruise port in Freeport. The cost, $200 million. And of course, on completion, it will make it easier to transport many more visitors to the shores of Grand Bahama. And Madam Speaker, the public-private partnership, or the PPP process, is underway for the redevelopment of the Grand Bahama International Airport, which was abandoned and left to rot. Abandoned and left to rot since Hurricane Dorian almost 3 years ago. Madam Speaker, the achievements of these last 8 months are just the beginning. We know how many Bahamians are hurting. We know how many families are depending on change and progress. We are only getting started. Yes. I now turn to a discussion of recent economic performance and prospects for the Bahamian economy. A discussion which, because of our openness, must be positioned within the context of economic conditions in the global economy. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, in its April 2022 edition of the World Economic Outlook, estimates that real world output recovered by 6.1% in 2021, from the 3.1% COVID-19 induced contraction in 2020. This recovery is attributed to travel and social restrictions being relaxed and an improvement in inoculation rates. This recovery was broadly based across the major economies. Real GDP growth for our major trading partner, the United States, expanded by 5.7% in 2021. This followed the decline in 2020 of 3.4% and was accompanied by a reduction in the jobless rate by 2.5 percentage points to 5.6% in 2021. Similar factors were behind the favorable performance of the Bahamian economy, which posted an estimated real GDP growth of 13.7% in 2021. This followed, of course, a contraction of 23.8% in 2020. This outturn was paced by strong gains in tourism, our major export, and benefited from the return of the high-value added stopover market segment, of which approximately 90% year-to-date 2022 is from the United States. Total air arrivals grew by 17.1% to approximately 2.1 million, following a 75.2% downturn in 2020. Although the sea component decreased by 11.8% to 1.2 million visitors, this was markedly improved from the 75.4% decline in the prior year. Aside from the leading tourism contribution, economic output also benefited from increased construction investments linked to a number of varied-scale foreign projects and ongoing post-Hurricane Dorian reconstruction works. The world continues to grapple with waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. New challenges have emerged here as elsewhere as we re-establish a positive growth trajectory. Around the world, inflation is now the main focus of both policymakers and consumers. Global trade is still being disrupted by issues arising out of the pandemic. This has led to shortages, supply chain interruptions, and higher prices for imported consumer goods. These factors, together with high energy prices and geopolitical tensions, have caused a spike in inflationary pressures. In commodity markets, average prices of crude oil rose by 68.1% to $71.04 per barrel in 2021. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organizations, the FAO, growth in the overall food price index advanced by 28.1% in 2021, from the 3.2% growth in 2020. Based on the IMF's World Economic Outlook report, these conditions caused a firming in global inflation to 5.7% for the advanced economies. In the Bahamas, because of our high dependence on imported goods, we also contended with the harsh reality of less favorable price conditions. Reflecting the pass-through effects of high global oil prices and prevailing supply dislocations, average consumer price inflation, as measured by changes in the retail price index, accelerated to 2.9% in 2021 from a negligible 0.04% in 2020. A key component was the firming in the average per gallon prices of both gasoline and diesel by 8.1% and 33.9% to $4.39 and $4.91 per gallon, respectively, which previously declined by 10.9% and 15.3% in the year before. Madam Speaker, based on the IMF projections, high rates of price gains are likely to persist for some time because of these ongoing adverse impacts. This is not good news for the global economy, which means that it's not good news for us. High inflation erodes purchasing power. It reduces the amount of money which businesses and consumers could spend. It also invokes a tightening in macroeconomic policy, as observed by the recent increases in policy rates in the United States. This has implications for a slowing in domestic demand and economic growth. The IMF projects that global output will expand by 3.6% in 2022. This is lower than the previous year's expansion of 6.1% and reflects adaptive monetary policy measures in the major economies to address higher global oil prices and impose stringent financial conditions that will no doubt dampen recovery. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the risks, the outlook for a tourism-based economy such as ours remains encouraging. This is especially because my government is proceeding with a strategy to address the harmful effects of the ongoing inflation pressures on consumers and is taking proactive, decisive, and targeted steps to ensure a more durable and broad-based economic growth momentum in the fiscal year ahead. Domestic economic activity is expected to maintain its growth momentum in 2022, bolstered by the sustained recovery in tourism output, along with several varied-scale foreign investment projects in the capital and Family Islands, and by post-Hurricane Dorian rebuilding works. However, the speed of the rebound in the tourism sector toward pre-COVID-19 levels remains reliant on the alleviation of all global imposed travel restrictions and broadening of vaccination efforts across countries. In other key economic indicators, monetary conditions in the Bahamas remain favorable and support stability in our exchange rates. At the same time, the subdued level of private sector lending activity contributed to ongoing buoyancy in liquidity levels and growth in external reserves. With the relaxation of the COVID-19 restrictions, external sector developments featured a narrowing of the estimated current account deficit by $164.4 million, which is 6.9%, to $2,210 million. This was because the services account reverted to a surplus position from a deficit in the previous year, owing to a recovery in tourism earnings. In contrast, the capital account surplus returned to trend in 2021, following a sharp rise in inflows in 2020. These were boosted by Hurricane Dorian reinsurance inflows, while the financial account inflows slowed because of a reduced level of public sector borrowings. Madam Speaker, a further note on the current increasing trend in oil prices. Given the corresponding upward pressure on most goods and services that we consume, this is of significant concern to the government. My government is committed to alleviating and addressing in a more sustainable manner the firming trend in global prices, including the impact of higher fuel prices on electricity costs. I'll speak to these measures later in my communication. The Minister of Works will also elaborate on the plans of BPL's board and management to secure greater operational efficiency. This will be achieved in part by leveraging independent power providers to bring to the Bahamas generation powered by solar power or natural gas. Our commitment to energy reform and lowering the cost of electricity to Bahamians across the board is more than just talk. The government shortly, on coming to office, appointed a Cabinet Energy Subcommittee that has been focused on advancing our commitment in the blueprint for change to transform LNG power generation. The subcommittee is advanced in discussions with providers to develop an LNG bunkering facility, the LNG conversion of our generation, and incorporating solar solutions. It is expected that these initiatives will keep the long-term average cost of electricity below 20 cents per kilowatt hour, which is at least more than 20% reduction from the current levels. We look to have a definitive agreed framework this fiscal year to announce to the Bahamian people. Our fiscal performance 2021-2022. Madam Speaker, I now turn to an examination of the fiscal outlook for the year 2021-2022, beginning with fiscal performance for the first 9 months of the fiscal year. These operational trends to date provide the basis for our revenue and expenditure forecast for the upcoming year and over the medium term. During the first 9 months of the financial year 2021-2022, total revenue increased by $617.6 million, or 50.2%, to $1,847.3 million as compared to the previous year. This largely reflected improvements in tax revenue of $526.4 million, or 50.9%, and non-tax revenue increases of $90.9 million, or 46.5%. Key developments underlying revenue performances were as follows. Property taxes collections increased by an estimated $9.8 billion to $96.6 million. Notwithstanding the reduction in the nominal rate of VAT from 12% to 10% in January 2022, VAT receipts increased by $366.3 million, or 78% of the budgeted forecast. And that increase took intake to $836.1 million over the 9-month period. Excise taxes were estimated at $46.2 million. Gaming taxes improved by $21 million to a total of $37.5 million. Taxes on international trade and transactions broadened by $183.5 million to $346.6 million and 83.1% of budget. The improved trade tax performances is largely explained by increases in customs and other import duty collections of $46.7 million to $180.9 million, and improvements in the patcher tax collections of $42.8 million to $42.8 million to $48.7 million. Revenue from the sale of goods and services rose by $58.7 million to $170.5 million. Increased revenue collections were attributed to increase in immigration-related receipts of $43.6 million to $99.8 million. Custom fees collections increased by $8.7 million to $36.9 million, and 61.5% of budget. Madam Speaker, during the 9-month during the 9-month period of the fiscal year 2021-2022, outlays for recurrent expenditure expanded by $80.7 million, or 4.2%, to a total of $2,021.5 million as compared to the same period in the prior year, representing 70.2% of the targeted spend. Compensation of employees increased by $24.4 million to $538.3 million, largely owing to the resumption of promotions, staff reclassifications, payment of increments, and other employee costs which were delayed for years. Spending on the use of goods and services widened by $21.8 million to $403 million relative to the same period in the previous year. This is due to rental costs rose by $7 million, driven by the payments of arrears to private sector landlords of $2.9 million and to the National Insurance Board of $5.3 million. Spending on services were elevated by $34.1 million due to unbudgeted expenses related to the COVID-19 response and outstanding health insurance premiums. Conversely, finance charges contracted by $37.4 million to $15.4 million, primarily due to reduced outlays related to government debt financing and foreign exchange hedging activities. Public debt interest payments widened by $69.7 million to $333.8 million, reflecting from the elevated levels of borrowing since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Government subsidies, which include transfers to government-owned and/or controlled enterprises that provide commercial goods and services to the public, also increased by $21.3 million to $351.3 million. Subsidies to public non-financial corporations were higher by $25.3 million at $335.9 million, owing to the unwinding of certain COVID-19 support programs. Pension and gratuity payments increased by $17.8 million to $129.9 million, which is 70.9% of budget. That's due to the government's promise and delivering of the cost of living adjustments for pensioners as outlined in the 2021-2022 supplementary budget. During the first 9 months of the fiscal year, capital spending contracted by $7.8 million to $160.1 million, mainly reflecting the reduction in the extraordinary COVID-19 related support to small and medium-sized businesses. Based on revenue and expenditure activities, the overall fiscal position for the 9 months to March 2022 recorded an estimated deficit of $334.3 million, which was $544.8 million below the same period of the year prior, and only 38.9% of the forecasted deficit. To finance operations, government net debt increased over the 9 months by $677.4 million, resulting in a total direct charge or direct claims on government at the end of March 2022 of just over $10.5 billion, or 87.5% of GDP. This represents a significant decline from the position at the end of June 2021. The government's debt ratio was 101% of GDP June 2021. I'll say that again. At the end of June 2021, debt was at 101% of GDP, and now we are at 87.5%. I am pleased to report that based on current projections, we anticipate revenue collections for the full fiscal year to total $2,455.1 million. This equates to $208.6 million above the revenue targets established in 2020. On the expenditure front, current trends suggest total recurrent expenditure will settle at an estimated $2,731.7 million and capital expenditure at $230.6 million. Madam Speaker, a few short weeks ago, during my midterm budget contribution, I reported to the House that upon coming to office, we encountered an estimated $1 billion in unsettled claims, unpaid bills, and arrears. I am now happy to report that over as many months, we have conducted an extensive exercise to pay down arrears and reconcile outstanding balances. However, we still have a number of inherited arrears which we believe it is important to liquidate. In this regard, we will be seeking parliamentary approval for a supplementary budget for additional recurrent expenditure of $216,928,017 and capital expenditure of $34,491,123. These balances are owed to hard-working women and men who have given their time, energy, and resources to contribute to the development of this nation. And months later, they still haven't been paid. This harmful practice cannot be allowed to continue. These outstanding balances include $56.7 million owed on insurance for the public servants. $45 million in arrears owed to Water and Sewage Corporation to settle balances to vendors. $30 million for the completion of the Andre Rogers Baseball Stadium. $19 million in outstanding payments owed to Doctors Hospital for COVID-19 emergency support. $6.4 million in outstanding rent payments. $6 million in outstanding legal claims, and $4 million for the restoration and refurbishment of public clinics. Just as our recently established credit bureau encourages citizens to make timely payments, so too must we in government be timely in paying our bills. In short order, Madam Speaker, in short order, we will bring to this House amendments to the Public Financial Management Act that will help to address these challenges. Going forward, the new PFM Act will allow all tax arrears collected to be deposited directly into the sinking fund. These funds will be directly earmarked to the settlement of debt, because in many cases, we would have already borrowed to settle those arrears. This amendment would increase fiscal discipline, as future governments will not be able to rely on arrears to fund current expenditure. Madam Speaker, as a result of operations, the resultant deficit in the financial year 2021-2022 is estimated at $756.6 million, or 6% of GDP. This represents a $100 million reduction in the projected deficit for that fiscal year. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the increasing, challenging global environment, my government remains confident that the way forward which we are charting for the benefit of our country and the Bahamian people will secure our national development for the years to come. And so, I will now set out a number of key policy initiatives which we will be pursuing in the coming fiscal year. As I said earlier in this communication, this budget is focused around three themes of priorities. Firstly, efforts to cushion the impact of increases in the cost of living currently being driven to new heights by global economic price forces. Secondly, to implement frameworks to grow the economy and expand opportunities for Bahamians. And thirdly, measures to enhance issues relating to the long-term security of our country. I shall begin by highlighting the expenditure proposed in the budget. I shall begin by setting out our expenditure relating to reducing the impact of rising costs. We have included amounts for pay increases for most public officers. This is because we recognize that the public officers have not had a general salary increase since we were last in office. And we have therefore engaged the leadership of the various public service unions to reach an agreement. At this time, we also like to announce the full reinstatement and payment of all outstanding increments. Madam Speaker, we also believe that the rate of minimum wage needs to increase because of the general erosion of spending power of ordinary Bahamians. An imperative which has been made more urgent by the current level of inflation. To this end, we have submitted a proposal to PPSU to increase minimum wage in the public sector with incremental increases starting in July. We have also engaged union leadership on the issue of a contributory pension plan. Contrary to popular belief, Madam Speaker, a significant portion of the public service workforce has no pension.
That's right.
This is simply untenable, and we hope that our partners in the labor movement share our view and seek to correct this anomaly within this fiscal period. This is how we are. These are our initiatives to help to ease the burden of the increasing cost of inflation. And so, Madam Speaker, and I use the word permanent in this instance, we have made a permanent increase in social assistance by 50%. In comparison to the pre-pandemic levels. 50%. This increased assistance is to be disbursed through the reintroduction of a conditional cash transfer program, which was commonly referred to as the RISE program. The audit of the food program. The audit. The audit of the food program, recently tabled in the House, showed that there was no accounting for a sizable portion of the funds allocated to assist citizens during the pandemic. We are intent on taking the steps necessary to avoid a repeat of this outcome in the future. We have also increased funding for NGOs by 10% across the board and have provided allocations to the 2 feeding programs headed by Bishop Walter Hanschel and Bishop Lawrence Rowe. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Bishop Hanschel and Bishop Roll have provided meals throughout the pandemic. And they continue to do so now with little to no public sector support. I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in thanking Bishop Hanschel and Bishop Roll, who, with such little support, fed thousands of people. However, Madam Speaker, our support to these hardworking NGOs goes even further. Under this new budget, all property owned by religious organizations, trade unions, civic organizations, and burial societies will now be exempt from the payment of real property taxes. Madam Speaker, this reduction in taxes will put money back in the pockets of the entities to allow them to further their reach in their communities. Coming out of the pandemic, Madam Speaker, coming out of the pandemic, one of the glaring critical national needs, which can no longer be ignored, is the need to enhance the level of individual and national health care that's being provided. Madam Speaker, I'm extremely pleased to be able to announce that we have allocated $10 million for catastrophic health care in this budget. This means This means that, Madam Speaker, for the first time, the government can provide meaningful assistance to long-term dialysis patients, heart patients, and others facing serious medical issues.
Yes, sir. You saw them.
You heard
them.
We have also provided funding to capitalize the Grand Bahama Health Center Development Company.
Wow.
This entity will construct the new Grand Bahama Hospital. This is being facilitated through a loan for $150 million, which is now being finalized. Let me add, Mr. Speaker, subject to agreement with the various unions, Madam Speaker, we have also provided funding to increase the salary of teachers. That's not all, Madam Speaker. We're not stopping. We have provided funding to increase the salary of teachers, but we have also provided funding to pay what I call a retention bonus to teachers and nurses. Madam Speaker, in our blueprint for change, we detailed a number of initiatives which will expand opportunities for Bahamians, especially in the orange, green, and blue economies. Our athletes have contributed so much to the Bahamas. Their successes inspire our student athletes at home and promote our country on the international stage. Recognizing this, we have restored the funding to the Elite Athletes Program as part of our effort to enhance Yes. See, and this effort is to enhance our support for our athletes and sporting programs, which is deserves. We have also included $1 million to facilitate the hosting of CRIFTA next year, which is also the funding and for funding our bid again to host the World Relay Games. And we have funding to support the return of the Bahamas Games. And we have provided for a 10% increase in grants for the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture. That's what we are for, man. I ain't finished yet, We have increased the allocation to urban renewal by an additional $500,000. This will allow for expanded reach into inner city communities through more meaningful educational and community programs, including its world-renowned marching band. We have provided adequate funding for the activities surrounding the 50th anniversary of our independence. For many years, Madam Speaker, our creative communities have emphasized the need for a national school for the creative and performing arts. Madam Speaker, this coming year, we are taking active steps to make this vision a reality. And in the coming months, we will be making more specific announcements in this regard. We go to expenditure, security. I've already spoken to the increased investments we are making in the national security services. To make our communities safer, we are also investing in our efforts to combat crime by investing in the construction of a new prison complex using a public-private partnership vehicle. We are also allocating $6 million in funding for the purchase of new vessels for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. We have also increased our capital allocation to the Royal Bahamas Police Force to allow them to purchase the necessary crime-fighting tools. Turning to the wider issues of security, Madam Speaker, we have increased the funding related to food security. Food is a security issue. and increased our direct support to farmers, because growing a greater share of our own food will dampen the impact of inflation. And it will provide economic benefits and opportunities for our people. A significant component of this support will be provided through a refocused Bahamas Development Bank and Small Business Development Agency. Yes. These agencies will work with the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine and the Bahamas Agriculture, BAIC. Yes. Yes. In providing that support. That's sexy. Yeah. We have allocated 10% of we need to hear this. Yes, yes. Because, I'm a family island fella. There you go. Madam Speaker, yes. We have allocated 10% of the overall revenue collected in the family islands from property tax, road traffic fees, for the creation of a Family Island Development Trust Fund. Yes. It's going to be seeded by $200 million. This fund will facilitate the government in making immediate and significant investment in the family island industry. This fund would be a sub-fund of the National Infrastructure Fund. We also propose to leverage the aviation-related revenue to create a fund for aviation infrastructure, which would be another sub-fund of the National Infrastructure Fund. This, combined with the Family Island Development Trust, will accelerate the reconstruction of Family Island airports. This intervention, these structures, will end the practice of Family Island infrastructure improvements being made a lesser priority than infrastructure improvements in the province. Just to make it clear, it's important to note that this does not mean that we will exclude Family Island projects from future capital budgets of the Ministry of Works. Far from it. This is just an addition. I'm making sure.
Whose phone is that?
I'm making sure.
In Zuma, Ragged Island.
Yeah. So
all that you did for the Family Islands. Somebody go ahead.
A Family Island? So what I did some people call it to say thanks, you said. But I just wanted to make it clear that the segregated funds that we are suggesting that will come from funds generated from those various islands is not to exclude the Family Islands from capital budgets of the Ministry of Works. They will still be included in that process. Yes. That's all. All it means is that the Family Islands will have their own dedicated fund to ensure that they keep pace with national development. Madam Speaker, We have allocated funding to reduce the government's carbon footprint through the installation of renewable energy systems throughout the Family Islands and increase the number of electric vehicles in the government's fleet. I am pleased to advise that this ambitious agenda is being funded without any general increases in taxes or rates. There are, however, some new and very targeted fees. For example, there's a cap on property tax. We are going to increase that cap from 60,000 to 120,000. Now, to reach that level, your house has to be valued over 20 million.
Lanny asked for that.
That's right.
Lanny asked for it.
We are now imposing, in addition to that, we are now imposing a minimum tax fee of 75% of the real property tax assessment for high-end properties which are exempt from property tax because they are in a rental pool. If these properties do not generate VAT revenue equivalent to the real property tax assessment, and so if you're part of a rental pool and your apartment is being rented or your condo is being rented, you'd expect VAT to be paid on the rent.
Yes.
So if we don't see no VAT coming from your rental and your partner's rental pool, all we're saying is, well, your real property assessment is $100. You've been renting your place for the 1 year, but we don't see the rent. Well, you give us 75% of that $100. And that is a new intervention because we are trying to close all these loopholes that we have. And that's one way of doing it. And that's for high-end properties. To demonstrate, and let me just say, to demonstrate that we are serious about collecting property tax, we are updating the law to simplify the process by which we can take action against all classes of property owners, with the exception of Bahamian owner-occupied properties. Madam Speaker, we are bringing into force legislation to cover vanity plates for motor vehicles, and there will be annual fees attached to those plates. We are introducing a new class of commercial driver's license for operators of heavy equipment or haulers of hazardous materials. We are clarifying the law on foreign yacht charters to ensure that operators of foreign yacht charters chartering in our waters register and pay VAT. Yes. Operators will therefore now be subject to the stringent policies of the VAT Act. We are also introducing business licenses for financial service providers and reintroducing business license fees for commercial banks. To ensure equity with insurance companies, we are eliminating the premium tax and are now requiring insurance companies to pay business license fees. Madam Speaker, we are increasing royalty fees for the export of seafood, and we are also formally prohibiting the export of conch in commercial quantities in order to encourage sustainable fishing of this precious resource. Yes. We are also implementing a service fee for those individuals who want to obtain their passport within 3 hours. Wow. Madam Speaker, our emphasis is to ensure that the tax system is fair and equitable, and that no single taxpayer has an advantage. In that regard, we have standardized the excise duty for the production of beer. It is actions like these which demonstrate our willingness to make the decisions which benefit the many and not the few. In this budget, we've also sought to introduce revenue measures to do the following: lower the cost of living, lower the cost for acquiring property and homes, and to encourage investment in key sectors. To achieve these goals, in this budget, we have reduced the duty on a significant number of food items to bring relief to our citizens and residents. You will hear more about this reduction in customs duty on food items during the course of the debate. We also recognize that an important part of our tourism experience is our unique culinary products, and we need to ensure that the sector remains competitive. We've also therefore reduced the duty on food items used mostly in the restaurant and tourism sector. Among the list of foods are those produced locally, such as chicken parts. Local production of chicken is less than 5% of total consumption. But we want and need to expand local production of all agriculture products. In this regard, the government will provide support to local poultry producers by assisting in lowering the cost of electricity, one of the primary inputs in organized poultry production. This support is in addition to the increased support being provided by the Ministry of Agriculture and other agencies. For instance, Madam Speaker, we have increased our food security allocation by $1.5 million to aid the provision of greenhouses and other smart technology for food production in the Family Islands, as well as to provide training and capacity building for farmers in the use of more modern technology. In the new budget, we are continuing to provide support to farms by allocating $500,000 to secure broilers and $600,000 in the form of livestock to increase the supply of fresh meats in the marketplace. We are investing $300,000 to restore the feed mill at Gladstone Road. This is to ensure. This is to ensure that farmers have ample domestic supply of feed for livestock.
That's right. Continuous.
And we are also providing $500,000 in grant support for farmers. Through the use of modern technology and resources, which we have in abundance, we plan to reduce our food import bills. This, Madam Speaker, is how you ensure food security. This, Madam Speaker, is how you ensure food sovereignty. This, Madam Speaker, is how we will feed our nation and bring down the cost of living. Madam Speaker, we are reducing the duty on roofing materials, plumbing materials, and electrical supplies. This will make it more affordable for everyone in the Bahamas to undertake any construction project. We have also reduced the duty on electric cars with a value of under $70,000 to 10%. For vehicles over $70,000, the duty will be 25%. The same framework that presently exists for all hybrid cars. These duty adjustments are part of a deliberate strategy to reduce nationally our carbon footprint. For Bahamians who dream of home ownership, this dream can soon become a reality. Currently, concessions are available for persons who purchase a home for the first time. We are expanding these concessions so that people who purchase a home or purchase land and construct their first home or purchase a house and renovate it to be their first home will receive the same level of concession. For those who are constructing or renovating their first home, we will refund up to $40,000 in cash for any VAT paid for construction services. Or materials purchased. Once the occupancy certificate is provided within 18 months of the commencement of the construction. We are also increasing the level of exemption for first home buyers from $250,000 to $300,000 and reducing VAT on property transfers below $1 million for individuals. We are increasing the real property tax exemption on owner-occupied properties from $250,000 to $300,000. So if your house is worth $300,000, you're exempted. We are eliminating VAT on property transfers between joint tenants of property. This is especially important to Bahamians who have inherited land jointly with siblings. We've also simplified the rules around transfers of property with similar but not identical beneficial ownership. We have, as well, eliminated nuisance fees in the Stamp Act for documents unrelated to the transfer of property or registering a financial instrument. Madam Speaker, we want to encourage investment by Bahamians, which is why we have reduced real property rates for commercial property, which will come into effect for the next 2022 tax year. We have eliminated the duty on telecommunications equipment and established a regime whereby IRCA licensees can benefit from a reduction in their communication fee for investments in emerging technologies such as 5G technology or fiber in the Family Islands. And so what we're doing there, Madam Speaker, is if they invest in emerging technologies in the Family Islands, fiber or 5G, once we know they'll get a discount on their taxes or their duties to enable them to make those expansions, but it has to be in the Family Islands. We have eliminated, Madam Speaker, we have eliminated import duty on lithium-ion and lithium phosphate batteries. These batteries are predominantly used for renewable energy. We have also simplified the process for bringing in renewable energy parks. We have also adjusted the current regime so that Bahamians in the Family Islands investing in short-term rental property in the Bahamas can not only purchase building materials duty-free, but get furniture and appliances duty-free as well. And we go further, Madam Speaker. To complement this effort, we will work with the board of the Bahamas Development Bank to develop a loan program for short-term rental property development in the Family Islands. Madam Speaker, this budget also includes funding to comprehensively address the scourge of crime. We need to catch and punish those who break our laws. But we also desperately need more solutions that focus on the prevention of crime so that we can break the terrible cycles of violence that grip our country. In addition, our Second Chance program will reduce recidivism and give people who have paid their dues to society a chance at a future. Since coming into government, the Bahamas has been a leading voice, Madam Speaker, on the global stage, addressing the urgency of fighting climate change. Bahamians are clear. Climate change is an existential threat for our country. And we cannot sit at home and just hope for progress. We have to fight for change. Madam Speaker, the reality of the situation for the Bahamas is as follows. A low-lying small island development state that we are, more than 70% of our land mass is highly vulnerable to the impact of a 2.5-degree increase in global temperatures via its resultant increase in sea levels. We'll be underwater. We are in a region that is highly prone to climate disasters, such as hurricanes, which have increased in frequency and intensity over recent years. And given the small size of our nation, we are a minor player in the contribution to global greenhouse emissions, which result in increases in global temperatures. It is for this reason that one of my first actions upon taking the helm of government was to address the General Assembly of the United Nations to reiterate our country's position. I also issued a strong challenge to carbon-producing nations to honor their previous commitments to help us in this fight against climate change. 2 months later, I attended the World Leaders Summit at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, COP26. Our advocacy in these arenas captured the attention of the world, and our voice, influence, and negotiating strength has increased as a result. In addition, we have created a specialized team in the Office of the Prime Minister dedicated to helping the Bahamas address the impacts of climate change at the national level. Madam Speaker, as a result of these coordinated international activities, we have seen a massive global shift in the perception of the Bahamas in relation to climate change matters. Along with this shift have been tangible results, such as an increase in support for the Bahamas to explore climate-resilient efforts, greater access to research and other opportunities in this area, and, more importantly, greater access to funding to support building resilience in this area. Madam Speaker, we have embraced these opportunities. And as a result, for the first time, the Bahamas is positioned to commercialize and earn financial benefits from our natural resources. I refer, of course, to our recent Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act, which will enable the Bahamas to earn revenues from our investments to preserve our marine habitats. During our recent debate on this matter, Madam Speaker, we went to great lengths to outline the opportunities for the country to earn carbon credits. What we have not stressed enough is the opportunities for education, training, and development for both Bahamians and international students that accompany this. Madam Speaker, however, as we expand our role and presence in the blue economy, there are increased areas for educational opportunities at the University of the Bahamas and international universities to focus on marine and climate change courses. The Bahamian public, investors, and international agencies should know that our plans are part of a well-coordinated effort to ensure sustainability and consistency in our approach to adopting a climate-resilient framework in the Bahamas. In line with international best practice, my climate change advisory team in the Office of the Prime Minister has begun the process of creating a national strategy focused on incorporating best practice in environmental, social, and governance in our long-term investment practices. This strategy will incorporate advice from local and international experts in the field. It will also ensure that the Bahamas is consistent in its application of the principles of climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Madam Speaker, it has long been a major complaint of businesses that a key challenge to the ease of doing business over the years has been the very high costs of electricity, the unreliable supply of electricity, and the limited inclusion of solar technologies in our energy mix, even despite our abundant potential for solar power and the tools at our disposal to solve this problem. Members may well remember that on the 5th of August, 2020, the government executed a $20 million loan with the Inter-American Development Bank for the reconstruction with resilience in the energy sector in the Bahamas. The objective of the loan was to support the government with the rehabilitation of critical energy infrastructure and restoration of electricity service in the islands heavily impacted by Hurricane Dorian, while facilitating the integration of renewable energy. The specific objectives were to support the rehabilitation of the electricity transmission and distribution system and installation of new and resilient RE capacity in Abaco and East Grand Bahama. 2, promote the adoption of solar PV technologies in the Family Islands. And 3, contribute to the improvement of the regulatory framework for RE technologies and the mechanisms for its deployment. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, two years later, when my administration came to office, the project had shown very little progress. And an RFP for a renewable contractor had been issued with a provision that the contractor needed to demonstrate that they have $500,000 deposited in a bank account. This automatically disqualified most Bahamian contractors. They then awarded a contract where the government pays 85% of the contract amount before the first panel is installed. There had been no widespread effort to support solar adoption in any of our islands. The framework for renewables has seen little movement, including no work to update the energy sector policy, which expired in 2020. Madam Speaker, since coming to office, my administration has moved quickly to rectify this and to capitalize on this missed opportunity by strengthening the project execution unit in the Ministry of Finance to ensure timely delivery, value for money, and to coordinate activities with other relevant stakeholders on this project. The result has been substantial progress on this project in the past few months. My administration, Madam Speaker, will use these loan funds properly. The immediate focus is the introduction and implementation of new models to develop resilient solar PV installations in the Bahamas. To accomplish this, an assessment of energy systems in New Providence and the Family Islands will need to be done. This work will start in the southeastern islands, namely Inagua, Maguana, Aucklands, Crooked Island, and Long Key. This year, we will deploy in those islands public decentralized solar PV plants, rooftop systems, and innovative microgrids with storage capacity. Additionally, pilot installations of solar photovoltaic systems on public buildings in Andros will also be carried out. Thereafter, the installations of solar photovoltaic systems will be extended to the central and northern Bahamas. Madam Speaker, a key aspect of this project is to ensure Bahamian participation and ownership in this industry. What this means, Madam Speaker, is that going forward, we are committed that all future maintenance, installation, site works, or the like will be conducted by Bahamians. Yes, sir. As part of this project, we are committed to have in its first cohort a minimum of 25 Bahamians trained and certified to operate in the sector. Yes. We will also commit and ensure that government funding agencies make resources available to those individuals who have successfully completed this course in order to support them in opening their own business in this sector. We will also encourage the inclusion of green technology in all new major construction and eventually provide the opportunity to offer similar services around the region. Madam Speaker, finally, I wish to consider the outlook for the upcoming fiscal year. The current budget projects a significant rebound in the Bahamian economy. Total revenue is projected at $2,804.4 million, at a 19.9% increase over the prior fiscal year, when the economy was in the early stages of an economic rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic. It incorporates many of our revenue-enhancing strategies and outcomes, such as increasing real property tax collections and compliance, and improved VAT performance based on the economic rebound, and growth in other fees as a result of improved revenue administration. In the budget for fiscal year 2022-23, VAT collections are estimated at $1,411.8 million, a 52.4% increase over the prior year budget. The increase is largely attributed to a rebound in economic activity, the economic stimulus associated with reduction in VAT from 12% to 10%, as well as the positive benefits of the removal of the COVID-19 emergency orders. Real property tax revenue is also forecast to improve by 6.7% to $169.4 million, but remain below the more than $280 million in real property tax invoices issued annually. Enhancements in revenue administration are critical in further improving collections in this area. One such transformative policy is the agreement of banks to assist in the collection of real property tax from mortgage holders. Madam Speaker, total expenditure is forecast at $3,368.4 million, with recurrent expenditure projected at $2,997.2 million, and capital expenditure estimated at $371.1 million. As a result of these operations, which incorporate prudent fiscal management and management principles, the fiscal deficit under the current budget is estimated at $564.3 million, or 4.3% of GDP. I wish to remind this Honorable House that this projected outturn does not include potential revenues from asset sales, such as receipt from the sale of the Grand Lucayan Hotel in Grand Bahama. In conclusion, Madam Speaker,
Mountaintop right now. This is a budget.
Madam Speaker, as I come to the end of my presentation in my first full budget communication, I wish to share this reflection. This is a time of great challenge for our country, but also a time of great opportunity. There is no doubt that the world's problems, from intensifying hurricanes to deadly viruses to energy shocks and supply chain interruptions, have all washed up on our shores. The perils are real, but so is the promise of what we can become if we move forward together. This budget provides a foundation to strengthen our nation, to lift ourselves up, to face the future with strength and optimism. This budget provides support for the here and now, and also charts the way forward for a brighter tomorrow. Madam Speaker, in taking our country forward, I'm confident that this budget does just that, and I commend it to the House.